Wonderful. Hey Twitch. Hey chat is the quilt. Um, so I'm by myself today, um, and not for long, probably around 30 minutes. And I think I'm probably going to use most of those 30 minutes to explain this kind of weird um, behavior of me sitting alone and talking to a camera. Um, because it feels weird. Because I've never done this before. Because I'm used to talking to actual people. Sorry for the noise. Um, and not the idea of people, right? Which is what this is, I guess. So, 12 days ago? Yeah, 12 days ago. A little shy of a couple of weeks. We did our first trial. Um, and it was interesting. We have 8 views, so I guess 5 of those are mine and Shai's, and 3 are you, our audience, uh, which is probably Tamara, Leah, and who knows who else. Oh, Elaine, maybe. um, but again, for me, it was interesting. It was, I haven't really watched all of it because it's long. So obviously, I don't blame anyone who didn't watch all of it. But I think there might be some potential there. I think like I told Chai, personal introspection, just the ability to kind of record my own thoughts, to hear this conversation, this dialogue that happens, um, and it was mostly about the content that we can create, and there are interesting subjects that came up, some more interesting than others, and um, and then it didn't happen again. And again, it didn't happen again. The idea was to do like a weekly session. We refer to it, I think, as something like a therapy session, right? So, and there's also noises outside because they're like redoing the front of the building. So ignore that, I guess. So yeah, it's a therapy session, and we thought we'd do this on a weekly basis, and we couldn't because Shai had other obligations, and he couldn't do Friday, and then he flew to London, and it felt like a pattern to me because one of the things that I'm seeing generally in the way I do things in life is that I start and then I leave them hanging. And sometimes there would be somebody there to pick it up and continue it forward. But most of the time, it's just stuff that never really materializes into anything. And it's um, it's something that I would really like to try and figure out a way out of. I would say that as a professional, um, um, working in the computer software industry, um, I have these, I don't know if you call them mantras, but I have these ideals. I have these, uh, um, uh, thought processes of how to do things so that they will succeed and how to, what is success and how to push it. Again, this might be actually an interesting subject to talk about, right? This is something that I've been doing professionally for many years, so I guess I have some wisdom to impart there, but that's not what I want to talk about today. Um, but one of the things that I want to mention now is that I talk about failure as a tool. If you're building a building, if you're building a structure, then you don't want to fail. You want to prepare, you want to design properly, you want to test, you want to do a lot of peripheral work to make sure that once you actually start building, you know what you're doing. And while you are going to have failures during that process, you need to be able to mitigate those failures. You need to be able to you design for the ability not to fail. So you kind of anticipate where you will fail and how to avoid those pitfalls. And you also design for post failure, right? Like what happens if we actually something happens? How do we recover, right? Because you have a goal which is to get to the construction of a building, and it's a massive undertaking, and if you fail, I guess cost effectiveness is the driving force, but but it's also, once the building is done, you want the building to be up to a certain standard. You want it to be able to house people, and you don't want those people to die. And sometimes there are failures, but failures are catastrophic. And in my industry, software industry, it's almost the opposite, meaning that failure is a tool to move things forward. I there's I would tell my coworkers, my colleagues, my employees, whatever my position was, that I would rather have somebody fail 4 times in a year, like fail every quarter, than have one success. Because the unlike building a real building with software, the collateral damage is very low. It's really easy to start over. It's really easy to reuse. So instead of trying hard not to fail and lengthening the process, which a lot of the time makes it become kind of invalid, um, you want to define you want to define failure well. You want to fail on a regular basis, quickly and sharply, so that you can stop and say, okay, I've declared failure. What do I do now, right? And then, and I had again, I'm not going to go into this because this is a podcast. This thing is not about me talking about methodologies for software development. This is me talking about myself. So I have these ideas on how to manage progress, how to define failure as something that drives progress forward. But when it comes to myself, I've never been very good at it. I've never been very good at defining failure. I've never been very good at saying, okay, I've failed. I've been terrible at collecting the value out of a failure and helping that value kind of propel me across and improve my chances of success. And instead, what I have been doing is just, um, letting things hang. Like I said before, something like this podcast, right? Which is why I'm broadcasting today, sitting weirdly in front of a camera and talking to no one. Because it's important for me to have continuity for this. It's important for me to explore this as intended, and then uh, again, I'm assuming I'm going to fail, which is I don't mind. That's a good assumption. I'm assuming this is going to fail, meaning this is not going to meet the required, performance indicator that I am going to set for this, which I haven't yet, which is another problem because if you don't have a goal, you can't really fail. But definitely one of them is having continuity and having more than just one recording. Um, and so here I am, and I'll add one more thing is that I started this with Shai, but I feel like this um, like Shai, I feel like Shai brings a lot of value. He's easy to talk to. It's definitely nicer for me to have a conversation, have a dialogue instead of just having a monologue. Um, I guess time is easier to fill, although that's not the problem here. Um, he brings obviously a lot of interesting information, ideas, wisdom that he imparts into the conversation, right? Uh, but I feel like I need to own this. I need to be able to, if need be, to carry a podcast like this by myself. Again, this is just no viewers. This is just for me. So you know, cheers. Should be a big problem. Um, but I need to feel like I'm able to carry this on my own, and I think once I have this, it's going to be easier for me um, to kind of design around that, right? So uh, one of the things we talked about is bringing in guests, right? So I have ideas for people that I want to bring and I want to talk to, and maybe Shai is a counterpart. Maybe Shai is an integral part of this podcast, but maybe he's just a guest. So I don't know yet, right? But I'm willing to explore both options. Um, so that is the reason why I'm recording. Um, okay, so what am I going to talk about? There's a different question that I'm not sure I have an answer to. But I think uh, uh, that again, like I said before, I don't have a lot of time today. My kids are coming back in about 15 minutes. I need to make dinner and stuff, um, so I need to not start on a topic that's going to take a lot of time, but rather just touch on something that's maybe like a tidbit or interesting. And I thought about, so we had a meetup of the quantum computing community on Monday, and I thought that would be like an interesting thing to kind of mention and talk about, and uh, kind of describe maybe, and there were some interesting things there. But something else happened, which I think is more interesting to talk about, at least for me. And since there's nobody here, it's just myself. It's okay. Which is that while at the meetup, a friend of mine that came by um, told me that a really old friend of mine, meaning a friend that was a good friend of mine in high school, but I haven't really been in touch with him for a couple of decades. That's because I'm old. Died. Right, died of cancer. He battled cancer for 7.5, 8 years. Bone marrow and such. Again, this information is from Facebook already, and that he died. And at first I was very, I don't know if dismissive, but it's like I said, I haven't been in touch with him. We really went our separate ways when like this was in Haifa, where I went to high school. Um, his name is Ofek, uh, which in Hebrew means dawn. Um, and I used to mostly hang out at his place. And play. He had a Commodore Amiga, and we used to play on his Commodore Amiga. We played together for a really large number of hours on a specific game. There were a few games, but there was one specific game that I still think that's probably the best computer game I've ever played, which is, again, I'm not a gamer, but I've played a lot of games. It's a game called Blood Witch, which is spelled WYCH, if anybody wants to check that out. It was like a dungeon crawler, but there was something about it that was very appealing. It was we could play it together, so each one of us had like a group of four adventurers, and you could actually play together. So you have two groups of four adventurers on one small screen. CRT, of course. I think 14, 15 inch. Yeah. But there was the gameplay was riveting, at least for us as kids. So I spent a lot of time there, um, and then when school was out, I left Haifa. I went to well, not to get into that, but my mother died, which was also kind of something that took my attention and my mind away. And then I moved south to Tel Aviv, and I served in Tel Aviv. I was in the army for 3 years, and afterwards I never came back to Haifa, and I just disconnected from all of my friends, all of the people who were my friends at high school. Like not actively disconnected, but I didn't maintain any of the connections. I guess I didn't value them enough. Same for Ofik. And then I thought this is like, um, and I guess it is in a sense. It doesn't really rattle me, but at the same time, it's there's a few things that I've been kind of experiencing over the last couple. This happened Monday, right? So we're Wednesday, so it's like less than 2 days, and it's been, I'm going through a journey. I'm thinking about the choices that I made. I'm thinking about, I'm not a big person for regret, but I'm thinking about what could have been done differently, and I definitely think about missed opportunity. And I want to touch on one thing, which is this is why I talked about this silly game. Um, so he died a week ago, 8 days ago, and I think I could actually check, but I'm pretty sure it was on the day he died, maybe the day before. Um, I would say out of nowhere, and I will disclaim and say that this already happened once or twice during the last 20 years. Okay, so this is not the first time that I do this, but total of 3 times over a 20-year span is still interesting as let's call it a coincidence. I thought about the game. I thought about Blood Witch. I thought about um, how I love to play it. I obviously thought about Ofik. It was like he was an integral part of the experience. We had all this banter and kind of funny terms that we used to describe the players, and we had like it was definitely a joint activity. So I definitely thought about him. I thought about the game. I went to check to see if there's a PC version or an Android version, and there is none. Um, and I ended up downloading an Amiga emulator onto my Android. It's still here. That's why I'm saying I can tell you exactly when it happened, because they probably have like, yeah, I think I can see on the Play Store when I downloaded it, because I had, that's what I'm saying, 3 times. I had an emulator from a few years back that wasn't working, so I downloaded an Amiga emulator. I downloaded the ROMs. I downloaded the game, and I tried to play it. Right, and it was kind of unplayable because of problems with mouse emulator and stuff. But it's interesting to me that something triggered this. Something made me think about this. Again, coincidence is fine. I have no problem, chalking this up to coincidence. But it's still an interesting coincidence. It's like this is kind of the only thing that binds me or bound me to this person. And this was a day before he expired. And expired. I don't know if that's the nice term, but the day before he passed away. And while I'm pretty sure that I wasn't on his mind the day before his passing, he had 4 kids and a wife and a life, and I was probably the last thing that was on his mind. There was, again, I'm not willing to state that there was something, but it just seems like a very powerful coincidence for me, um, that just like on the day he died or the day before, I never think about him. And I thought about him, and I thought about our shared experience, and I went and I downloaded the game and I tried to play it, I think one of the things I took away from that experience is that it's gone. It's no longer valid. I can't. It was something that might have existed in the past, and I guess we will touch on the existence or non-existence of the past in another session, because I think it's an interesting topic. I personally um, don't believe, that the past exists. I think the past is. Oh, that's never mind. It's quantum stuff. Um, but this memory that I have is something that's impossible to recreate. Not just because Ofik is gone, not just because time has passed, and because there are new computer games and new experiences that I've had. It's just because there's something unique about an experience, even though it wasn't an instantaneous experience. It went on for more than a year. It's impossible to recreate that unique experience. And I think there was some appreciation for me for that at that moment. Um, uh, so yeah, I guess that was my point. That's what I wanted to kind of talk about and expose and record, for posterity. um, and again, just to be completely clear, I am much more. It's much more favorable to me the concept of you know our brain filtering out information to present what we see as coincidences, rather than to think that the explanation is some kind of mystical connection between his existence and my existence. While I don't discount the possibility, I think that there are other explanations that are more likely. And again, this I will use the example that Richard Feynman used when talking about this, which I think is something that I carry with me as an example, and he carried it with him as an example. So he is my spirit animal. So his story is about him sitting in the library and reading or something, and somebody and he thought, and his grandmother was dying, and he thought about his grandmother, and just as he was thinking about her, somebody came up and said, "Hey, Mr. Feynman, you have a phone call." And he was really worried, and he went and he answered the phone call. It was something completely unrelated, and he told himself, "I need to remember this. I need to remember that this happened." I was kind of my brain was expecting to have some kind of connection. It did not happen, and usually what the brain does is that the brain erases those memories. It discards those insignificant moments where things don't connect. And it only remembers the times that things connect, and that's why we have the feeling of coincidence or the feeling of kismet or whatever it is. That things are supernaturally connecting in our mind, and it's much more likely that our brain is just constantly searching for patterns, constantly dismissing that which it does not find pattern in, doesn't have the capacity to remember everything, so it only remembers what it sees as patterns, and what emerges is a world full of patterns where patterns don't really exist, right? And again, that's also probably something that's better left to a different kind of conversation. Um, but um, but that's my point. Um, so it's 3:30, so I probably need to wrap this wonderful session up. It was a pleasure talking to myself. I will thank myself for participating. um, and and yeah, I'm still hoping that I will um, get to have another session this Friday with Shai. So I'm not I'm not discounting the possibility of Shai being an integral part of this. Friday is in 2 days, so maybe that will be great. Um, and if we do, I think we actually decided that we're going to start with a very personal perspective, and my history with my dad, one of my dads. Um, so we might uh, we might do a podcast in 2 days. I don't know though. But if anyone's watching here now or sometime in the future, thank you for listening. It was an interesting experience, especially for myself. I will be rewatching this and probably feeling very awkward and weirded out. But again, I think it's important for myself, and actually don't really do a lot of things for myself. So I'm happy that I did. All right, peace out.